Good morning, guys. In the last session, we discussed about how to access secured REST API by sending basic authentication details in the request header. So we developed a REST API. That REST API is having security with the basic authentication. So in order to access that secured REST API, we need to send authentication header details. Authentication details in the header like this. Key will be authorization and value should be basic space encoded username and password we need to send. So from the Postman we can send this, from the browser we can send this, from the Java application also we can send this. To send it from the Java application, we are taking the code like this. So when you are using REST template, by using exchange method, you can send the basic authentication details like this. Suppose if you are using web client, then we can send authorization details, basic authentication authorization details by using header method. So by using REST template, we can send like this. By using web client, we can send like this. So if your REST API is secured with the basic authentication, then we need to send that details in the request header. Then only it will process our request. Otherwise, our request will not be processed. That is what we learned in the last session. And I have given one assignment also. We need to develop one Spring Boot application with registration and login functionality by using Spring Security. When we register, that record should be inserted in the table by encrypting the given password. And when we log in, it should verify credentials are valid or not. If credentials are valid, it should display success message. If the credentials are invalid, it should display error message. How many of you able to complete this requirement? Anybody who completed this application development, which we discussed in the yesterday's session? Any one person from the class?
Yes, sir, completed.
You completed. Can you show me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Again, Akil completed this. Yesterday also he completed the task and today also he completed. Yeah, Akil, you can share the screen and show the code.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Guys, are you able to see the screen? Yes, we can.
Yeah, there are two URLs I have provided. One is for the registration and one is for the login. Okay, this is the configuration. I have to do some changes here.
In memory is not required na? Because we are giving the user details.
Yeah, right. So even I have added this bcrypt.
Yeah, bcrypt
for the
encoder to
encryption.
encrypt the password, correct?
Yeah. And when it comes to the registration, so I'm encoding this password as soon as I get from the request body. I'm
Okay.
encoding it and saving it to the database. So this is the one. Encoded password is saving.
Correct.
So when it comes to the login, as soon as I get my user, that is the request body. So I'm getting first the existing one, saved password, and comparing with the provided password. So this is a match which checks the integrity. And as soon as we get a login, then we say success message. Otherwise, we say invalid credentials.
Okay.
So because I already have a user. So when I send, so let's start. Saved. Login successful.
Okay, good. Perfect. Anyone else, guys? Okay, fine. So let me explain how to develop the application to implement user registration and user login by using Spring Security. So the requirement is very clear. All of you, could you please confirm, is my voice audible? All of you, could you please confirm, is my voice audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, so good. Now, I want to create one application with a registration and login. So new Spring Starter project. I'm giving the project name as 08 Spring Security Registration and Login Application. Registration and login application. Java version 17 I'm selecting. Packaging type I'm using as Java. Right, click on next. And dependencies. So we want to communicate with the database, right? I'm using MySQL driver. I'm using DevTools and Data JPA, Web Starter, Spring Security Starter. So these are the dependencies I'm using. Web Starter I'm using, which is used to develop a REST controller. JPA Starter I'm adding to communicate with the database to perform the CRUD operations. As I want to communicate with the MySQL database, I'm using MySQL driver. And I want to implement security in the application. So I'm using Spring Security Starter, and I'm taking DevTools also, which are used to restart the server whenever there is a code change. Good. Click on next and click on finish. So with this, my application is getting created. In this application, we need to configure our database properties. We want to communicate with which database? Right, data source properties I will configure. So the very first step that we are going to follow here, creating a Spring Boot application with the required dependencies. Then second thing, I need to configure data source properties. I need to configure my data source properties in application.properties file. Application.properties file we are using. All right, so let me go with this properties file. Already JPA properties we have in the properties file. Let me take the same properties and let me configure them. Okay, our database name is SBMS45. So in this application properties file, I'm adding those properties. All right, username, password, and URL is available. Show SQL true, DDL auto update I have taken. Good. Now we need to create entities and repositories in order to communicate with the database. Create entity classes and repository interfaces which are required for our application. So create entity class and repository interface. So let me take one simple entity with a name called user or customer. Okay. Now in.ashokit.entity. I'm taking the class with the name called customer, name, email ID, and phone number that we are going to consider. So let me take some properties here. Private integer customer ID and private string name and private string email, private string password. Okay, if required, we can store the phone number also, long phone number. Now, I want to represent this class as a entity class. For that, we are using @entity annotation. So for this, we are using @entity annotation. Then we are going to represent this as a primary key. For that, we are using @id, and I want to auto generate that value. For this, I am using @generated value. Strategy I am going to use as identity strategy I'm using for this. Now, let me generate setters and getters for these variables, guys. I'm going to generate the setters and getters. Right click, source, generate getters and setters for all these variables. For entity class, it is important. Now, with this, my entity is ready and I'm using a primary key as customer ID. Then let me go and create one repository for this. I'm creating repository which is customer repository. So it is going to extend the properties from JPA repository, extends the properties from JPA repository. To simplify CRUD operations in the application, we are extending the properties from data JPA, and primary key data type is integer. So with this, we are good. Now, so whenever you go for JPA repository, some predefined methods will be available. Find by ID, find all. Suppose if I want to retrieve the record based on the non-primary key, then we should write find by method. I'm writing one find by method, that is public customer find by email. So based on the email ID, I want to retrieve the customer record. Based on the email ID, I want to retrieve the customer record. So public customer find by email method I am using, which is used to retrieve the customer record based on the email ID. So with this, we are able to create one boot application by using these starters, and we configured data source properties in the properties file. I want to communicate with MySQL database, and I created one entity class and I created one repository interface. In the repository interface, I have taken one find by method. We already know what is the purpose of find by method. Find by method is basically used to retrieve the records based on the non-primary key columns. If you want to retrieve the record based on the primary key column, find by ID method is available. If you want to retrieve the records based on the non-primary key column, then we are going to use find by methods. All right, fine. So with this, we are good. Then next one, in the data JPA, we have predefined methods and we are calling find by methods. Next one, so in order to verify the record, in order to retrieve the record from the database table in the Spring Security, we are going to use one user details service. So okay, this is important, guys. So new class, I'm going to create one service class. Okay, so this service class is my user details service class. My user details service class are customer service. I'm going to take customer service interface. I'm taking here. That customer service interface is going to implement one predefined interface, guys, which is user details service provided by Spring Security to load the user records from the table. In our scenario, it is a customer record. I want to represent this as a string bean. For that, we are using @service annotation. So I'm implementing one predefined interface called user details service interface, which is provided by Spring Security. When you implement this interface, we need to override one method, load user by username. So there is a predefined method available, we are overriding, which is used to retrieve the user record. So how we are going to retrieve the user record? By using customer repository. Private customer repository is available. I'm injecting that customer repository by using AutoWire. Customer service class I have created. My customer service class is implementing user details service. Now, in this I am overriding a method, load user by username method is available. String username we are passing for that. Now, I need to retrieve the record based on the given email ID. I need to retrieve the record based on the given email ID, which is string username or email ID, whatever it is. Now, customer repo dot find by email. Okay, so whatever the username that we are getting, email ID we are getting, we are taking. Let me take this parameter as email. Find by email with the given email ID, I'm going to retrieve that. But method name is predefined, guys. Load user by username, which is going to give us the customer record based on the given email ID. A find by method I have taken. So it is giving me the customer object based on the given email ID. Object means that may available, may not available. Now, whatever the customer object we are getting from the database with the given email ID, I need to return in the form of user details object. So for this, we are going to create a return new user, which is Spring predefined class, guys. Username, password, and authorities. So email ID that I'm going to return c.get email and c.get password, c.get email and c.get password. And what are the roles available for the user? Currently, I don't have any roles. So I'm giving the roles as empty list, guys. Collections.empty list method I am calling. So I'm going to return empty roles for that. I'm going to return empty roles for that. Are you clear with my point? Look at this logic now. Look at this logic now.
Suppose username found exception will be the really one is hello.
Yes, sir.
Suppose user not found exception will be the predefined exception.
I did not get your question.
Sir, user not found exception, which is a predefined exception.
Yes, sir. We are implementing an interface. In that interface, there is a method. Okay. So we are implementing an interface. In that interface, we have a predefined method, which is load user by username. So we are writing this method. Spring Security internally will call this method to load the user record for the authentication purpose. Spring Security will call this method internally to perform the operations. So we are creating one service class. In that service class, we are implementing user details service. What is that user details service? What is that user details service? The user details service is basically a Spring Security provided interface. We are overriding that. And we are returning customer record in the form of user details object. Why we are taking user details service? Authentication will be taken care by Spring Security. We no need to bother about that. So that's why we created one customer service interface. In this interface, we are implementing this. We are creating customer service class. In that class, we are implementing this interface. In this interface, there is abstract method load user by username. So this method is basically used to retrieve the user record for the authentication. So this is a predefined method. We are overriding method.
Sir, user detail is not.
Hello, Ashok sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, what is the use of collections.empty list methods?
That means a empty object we are going to supply. Whatever the user record we are passing. So username and user email ID password collections.empty list means what are the roles of the user. Currently for that user we don't have any roles concept. That's why empty list I am passing. Instead of giving a null value, I'm giving a empty list for that. That means there is no data. Are you guys clear with this service class? Are you guys clear with the service class? Anybody having any confusion on this?
So it's kind of alternative to in-memory authentication.
Correct, sir. This is alternate to in-memory authentication. Earlier, we configured the database credentials within the application. Now I want to load the database credentials from the database. So to load the credentials from the database, we are going to use this user details service concept.
Okay.
Okay. So that user detail service is a predefined one. So that is the reason we are implementing that interface and we are overriding that method. So whenever we want to implement a login, internally Spring Security is going to call this method and it is going to perform authentication of our user. You no need to implement whatever the Akil has done for the login. We no need to do that. Spring Security internally will take care of that. So to give this information to the Spring Security, we have taken this one, that user detail service class we have taken for that. Internally, it will take care of that authentication by loading this method. This method will be called in the background. Spring Security will call this method.
Sir, exactly from which collection or table it is speaking? Where is that reference?
Repository.find by email. What is the meaning of repository.find by email? It will fetch from the customer table only, right?
Okay, by name we are calling. Okay.
So repository.find by email we are calling that. Find by email is a custom method. That means it is going to load the record. It is going to load the record from the table based on the given email ID. Without password, it will load the record. Password, it will compare later to verify that is valid or invalid.
What about encoding, sir? Like encryption?
It will take care of that encryption and encoding. So we no need to do it. For the retrieval, we no need to do it. At the time of insertion, we need to do it.
Okay.
Perfect. So once it is done, now let me create the security configuration class for the customization. So registration, login only. I mean, do we need authentication for registration and login, or anybody can access that? Come on, guys. Registration and login, anyone can access, or only specific people can access?
Anybody can.
Anyone can.
Anybody can access. So we need to allow the registration URL and login URL for everybody. So now let me represent this class as a configuration class, and let me enable web security here. So I'm enabling configuration and I'm enabling web security here. Now, so first thing here, we created a customer service which is used to load the user record. I need to inject that customer service object here. Private customer service. So I'm using that customer service object I'm injecting here by using @autoviral. Right? Customer service object I have injected in this security config. And password we need to encrypt in our application, guys. We don't want to store the plain passwords in the database. So to do this, I'm going to use public password encoder bean. I am going to configure. I'm taking password encoder bean. I'm going to use bcrypt password encoder in our application. Bcrypt password encoder. I'm configuring that as a Spring Bean. Okay. So I have taken @bean annotation here. So what is the meaning of @bean annotation? What is the purpose of this @bean annotation?
Customize our.
What is the purpose of @bean annotation?
It will create the object for our class when we will
In
require.
our application, wherever you want to perform the password encoding, there we are going to use this bcrypt password encoder. I'm configuring as @bean. Next one, in order to perform the authentication, credentials are we configuring in our local system, or credentials will be available in our database table, guys? Credentials will be stored in the local in-memory credentials, or DB credential, DB database will be used for the credentials storing now.
Database.
So authentication provider is database. So we need to get the credentials from the database to verify user login credentials are valid or not. So that's where we are going to configure one more bean here, which is called authentication provider. Okay. Auth provider we are going to take in our application, that is going to provide the authentication provider information. Authentication provider we are configuring as a Spring Bean, right? So who is our authentication provider? Database. From the DAO, I want to get it. DAO authentication provider is available, which is auth provider for our application is equal to new DAO authentication provider we are taking. DAO authentication provider object we are creating. For this auth provider, we need to set auth provider dot set user details service. Who is going to load the user details? Our customer service class is available, which is going to load the user details. And how it should verify the password? Set the password encoder for this. Set the password encoder. Already we configured password encoder as a bean. Then we are going to return that authentication provider. Okay. So for our application, we want to implement authentication logic. That authentication, instead of we are doing, we want Spring Security to perform the authentication. But where are the details available to perform the authentication? Details available in the database. Customer entity available. In the customer table records will be available. Now to communicate with the customer table, customer repository we created. In the customer repository, we created one find by method to retrieve the customer based on the given email ID. Then we created one customer service, which is implementing user details service, which is having a predefined method, load user by username. So we are loading that user record based on the given email ID. Then I'm creating one app security configuration class. In this class, I'm enabling web security, and I have injected my customer service bean by using auto wiring. And I'm configuring password encoder bean. When user is registered in our application, we want to encode the password and we want to store that password into database. So that's why we configured password encoder. Here. Now, next, who is going to take care of the authentication in our application? Who is the authentication provider? DAO authentication provider. That means it should communicate with the database in order to get the details for the authentication. So for this authentication provider, I'm setting user details service. That means this authentication provider will go to my customer service and will execute this method to load the customer record for the authentication. And the customer record will be available with the encoded password. So that's why I'm setting the password encoder, so that it is going to deal with the password for the verification purpose. So like this authentication provider we configure. So what is the purpose of this authentication provider? It is used to load customer record and it will perform the authentication. So customer record will have the encoded password. So that's why I'm setting the password encoder. Which method it should use to load the customer record from the database at the time of login? It should use my customer service. When it is go to the customer service, it is having a method. Internally, this method will be called to retrieve the customer record for the authentication. So authentication provider we configured as a bean and password encoder we configured as a bean. Are you clear with my point?
So we don't have to explicitly do the comparison. It will internally
Spring Security will take care of the comparison of the password. You no need to do that. Whenever you log in, based on your email ID, it will retrieve the record. In the record, whatever the password is available, whatever the password you have given, it will compare that and it will verify valid or invalid. You no need to do that. That is the reason in the user detail service, we are retrieving the record only based on the email ID, not with the password. Password comparison will be taken care by authentication provider by using password encoder, because in the database, encrypted password will be available, but a user will give original password for the login. This original password also will be encrypted and will be compared with the password which is available in the database. We no need to do the comparison. Spring Security will take care of the comparison.
Okay. And what about the email ID, sir?
That we will give in the
Okay,
login.
here we are directly passing the customer service. Okay, got it, sir. Got it.
Good. Now, so authentication provider we have given. For the authentication provider, we are telling how to load the user record by using user detail service and which password encoder it should use to compare the passwords. That we are configuring as a bean. Authentication provider we configured as a bean. Now, authentication manager we should be configured. Authentication provider will be managed by one authentication manager. So public authentication manager we are going to configure as a bean. Auth manager, auth provider and auth manager we are taking. Now here authentication manager is going to take authentication configuration, guys. It is going to take authentication configuration will be available. So using that config, return config dot authentication manager, get authentication manager. So we are going to get the authentication manager as a Spring Bean. So this method is giving the exception. Let me throws exception. All right. So total 3 beans I have configured in my security configuration. What are the 3 beans I have configured? One is password encoder bean I have configured. Another one authentication provider bean I configured. Another one authentication manager I configured. So the flow is authentication manager we are going to use to perform the authentication. Then authentication manager will internally talk to authentication provider to perform the authentication. Authentication provider will internally talk to user detail service to load the record based on the given data, and it will use password encoder to compare the data. Password encoder, authentication manager, and authentication provider is available. Here order is not important, though there are 3 beans we have configured in order to perform authentication in our. These all are used for authentication. That means for login only. We don't need to write the logic to perform the login. We will tell to authentication manager to perform the authentication. Authentication manager will talk to authentication provider. Authentication provider will talk to user detail service to load the record based on the given email ID. And it will use password encoder to compare the customer record password available in the database, customer given password for login. In the database, encrypted password will be available, but the user will give original password. This original password also will be encrypted and will be compared, matching or not. If it is matching, okay. If not matching, it is failed. So for that reason, we are making all these configurations. Are you clear? All of you look at these 3 beans I have configured.
Sir, this password encoder, do we need to specify, don't we need to specify the key?
No, sir. Bcrypt encoder, this is a default, it's a predefined password encryptor. You don't need to specify any key.
General
Bcrypt-
password we can't do, sir.
Sorry?
Normal password without encoding.
No, sir. I mean, generally we don't store the passwords directly in the database, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, generally we configuring like user details service bean also, sir. Like that also we can implement user detail service bean.
Class name can be anything. I have given the name as customer service. You can give user service also.
Okay, sir. Okay.
This is just a class name.
Okay, sir.
Class name can be anything. The thing is, you need to implement this interface and you need to override this method. Internally, authentication provider will call this method to load your customer record or user record from the table for the authentication. Only based on the email ID it is loading. What about the password? Password will be encrypted. Password
Yes, sir.
comparison will be taken care by authentication manager. You no need to compare the passwords are matching or not.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Got it. Yes.
Now, next security filter chain that we need to configure, guys. So I'm using public security filter chain is available that I'm writing as security config. HTTP security we are taking. HTTP we are taking as a parameter. So this one also I want to customize as a Spring Bean. For that I'm writing @bean annotation. So which URLs we need to allow, which URLs we should not allow, that you can configure. So I'm going to write login and registration. Both I want to allow. So I don't want to say anything. So here 2 URLs will be available. Those 2 URLs I want to secure. Got my point? Okay. How to customize that security filter chain, guys? Any idea?
HTTP dot authorized requests and
Yes,
match.
we are going to use return HTTP dot authorize HTTP requests, whatever we are having. Okay, and we are taking the request objects here, and we need to specify request matchers. Any request which comes with the /register and with the /login. /register and /login is available. Dot permit all. Okay. Any other request which is coming, then that should be authenticated. Any other request which is coming, that should be authenticated. Okay. So fine. Next one, we need to use this return HTTP dot build. What is the meaning of HTTP dot build, guys?
Sir,
what is the meaning of HTTP dot build?
It will build our security filter chain object.
Yes.
Using using builder change, like the design
Going
pattern,
to,
the builder
it is
format
going to
design
build
pattern.
our security filter chain. It is going to build our security filter chain. Right. Security filter chain I am configuring as a Spring Bean. For this I am taking HTTP object. HTTP.authorize request I am taking. So the request object we are passing. Request.request match. Register and login. Permit all, any request and authenticated. Okay. Going to authenticate any other request. Only the login and registration. Login and registration we are going to allow. Good. Let's try this. If it is not working, then we will debug that. So fine. So in this application, we created a customer service by implementing this interface, and we configured password encoder as one bean. We configured authentication manager bean. We configured authentication provider bean, and we configured security filter chain bean. This is for security. Now I am going to create my REST controller, guys. I'm going to create my REST controller, which is used to handle the request. Okay, login method and registration method I'm going to create here. So .rest package I'm taking customer REST controller. Right. So to represent this class as a REST controller, I'm using @REST controller annotation. In this, I'm going to write the methods which are responsible to take care of login and registration. Okay. So before this, in the customer service, one predefined method I'm overriding, and I need to write other methods also. Okay. Or else in the REST controller, I can write it. Fine. Public response entity of string save customer. Okay, I'm going to take the customer object as a input. This one, I'm taking this as a post mapping method, right? /customer. So this customer object I'm getting from the request body. So let me write a annotation which is request body to take the data from the request body. Now what I need to do, I need to save this customer in the database table. So to save the customer in the table, I need a repository. So let me take private customer repository. Customer repository object I am injecting here. So for this I'm using auto wiring. Fine. So I will do that customer repository dot save of customer object I am saving. But before saving the customer object, I need to encrypt the password. For this, already we have taken password encoder bean in our application. So let me take private password encoder, which we configured as a Spring Bean. Bcrypt encoder we configured. Let me inject it. Now, with the password encoder, I'm going to encode the password. Password encoder dot encode customer dot get password. Whatever the password we are getting, we are encoding that password. Okay, so it is going to give the encoded password for us. Then I will set back to the customer dot set password. I'm taking the original password and I'm encoding that password. Are you able to understand this? In my REST controller, I have taken one method which is mapped to post request, guys. So this method is used to save the customer record in the table. Customer data I am expecting in the request body, it will come in the JSON format. So at the time of registration, user will give the original password. I'm taking that original password and I'm encoding that password by using password encoder, and I'm overriding the password here. Okay. So original password I'm taking, I'm encoding. Then I'm resetting the password which is encoded to the customer object. Then I'm calling customer repository.save method. Now I want to send the response back to the UI, which is return new response entity. New response entity, I will say that customer is saved or customer registered. Customer registered. So HTTP status code I'm going to give HTTP status dot created. Created nothing but 201. That will represent that the record is inserted successfully in the database. So first we need to verify the registration is working as expected or not. If the registration is working as expected, then we will talk about login functionality by using Spring Security. Are you clear with this REST controller method, guys? Are you clear with the REST controller method now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Just I'm taking the customer record in the JSON format and I am encoding that password by using password encoder, and I am trying to insert the record by using save method. Okay. Are you able to follow this? Can we run this and can we test it, guys? Let me run this application. Go to the start class of the application. Let me run this as a Spring Boot application. Currently in my database, there is no table available with a name called customer. Because of this auto DDL, table should be created now. Go to this application console and see that the table is getting created or not. Yes, we are able to create a table with a name called customer. Create table customer. Customer table will be created. Show tables. Yes, customer table is created, and let us verify. Select a star from customer. Yeah. Is there any record available in the customer table, guys? Is there any record
No,
available
sir.
in the
No, sir.
customer
No.
table, or record is not available in the customer table?
No, sir.
No, record is not available in the customer table. So let me go to the Postman. Let me go to the Postman. Postman.com. I already have the Postman in my system. Let me open that. I want to send a post request and I want to see really are we able to insert the record in the table or not. Customer record. Okay. So I'm keeping a breakpoint here in the REST controller. Whatever the request is coming, I want to check it. I'm keeping a breakpoint there. Go to the Postman tool and send a post request. Send a post request 8080/customer. Right. No authentication required. We are allowing that. Anybody can register. No authentication required for this one. No auth. Go to body. Customer data we need to send. Customer ID we don't need to send. Customer name. Name is something like Ashok, and email ID already there. Customer email we are sending, and customer password. Original password we will send here. I will give the password. This is ashok@gmail.com. Password I am giving ashok@123. And phone number I will give, that is a number type in the backend. So I'm giving some phone number like this. All right. This is my customer JSON data. Name, email, password, phone number. You say check it in the binding class. Name, email, password, phone number. ID I am not sending because it is a primary key. That should be auto generated. Now, So I'm sending a post request. There is no authentication. Directly I'm sending the post request because as per our security configuration, it should allow the request which is coming with register. Okay, this is the URL pattern is register. In the REST controller, I should give this post mapping with register, not the customer. I'm allowing the URL pattern which is register. Yes, my application is restarted because of dev tools. Code changes happened, so application is restarted. Now go to Postman and send the request and observe. I'm sending the request. Is it allowing the request or it is not allowing the request, guys?
Register.
Not
No.
allowing, sir.
That is wrong.
Wow.
URL pattern is register. Click on send. When I send the request, is it allowing or it is not allowing? Request is
Not
allowed or
allowing.
request is not allowed?
Not alone, sir.
Not allowed.
What is the error we are getting?
Forbidden, sir.
What is the error we are getting? We are getting forbidden error. We are getting forbidden error, which is 403. So let us see why we are getting 403 error here. So let's go to our chat GPT. Okay, Spring Security post request. In Spring Security post request giving 403 error. What they are saying, guys? In Spring Security, whatever the request I'm sending a post request to this URL, which is available in the application. So when I get this, when I send the post request, I'm getting 403 error. So I'm asking the chat GPT why I am getting this error. In the Spring Security post request giving 403 error. A 403 forbidden error in the security typically indicates that server understood the request, but it refuses to authorize it. There are some common reasons are available. One of the common reason, CSRF protection. Second common reason, security configuration. So in the security configuration, you need to allow that, permit that request. Okay. And the second one, you need to disable CSRF. If your application has a CSRF protection enabled, which is a default in the Spring Security, make sure you are including CSRF token in your request. You can do this by using this token, or you can only disable if you are handling the CSRF in other way. Okay, what is the CSRF? First thing, they're asking to disable CSRF. What is the CSRF? CSRF stands for cross-site request forgery, security vulnerability that allows the attacker to trick a user into submitting malicious request on the web application where the user is authenticated. So they are saying that, boss, in your application, CSRF protection is enabled. Because of that, CSRF by default in the Spring Security, the CSRF protection will be enabled. Because of that CSRF protection, you are not able to handle that request. So what we need to do here, dot CSRF customizer with the defaults disable. With the defaults, we need to disable that CSRF. Return http.csrf.disable. We need to disable that CSRF, guys. So how to disable it? Return http.csrf configurer. We need to disable that CSRF. Return csrf.disable.build. Okay, so I am disabling the CSRF and I am building that HTTP object. Let us try, is it working or not? The CSRF, only plain CSRF method is deprecated. The plain CSRF method is deprecated. So we need to use the latest approach. Currently it is deprecated. Let's try. Is it working or not? We will verify that. Clear this? Now, in my database, you can check, select star from customer. The record is not available. Let's go to the postman and let us send a request. Now I got the request to the method. There is a breakpoint is available. Now our request is getting processed. So we got the customer record in the request body and customer data also we got. Password I have given Ashok IT, Ashok@123, that is my original password. Now I am encoding that password by using password encoder. So we are using bcrypt password encoder in our system. By using that bcrypt encoder, we are encoding that password. Now see, the password is converted into encoded format by using bcrypt password encoder. Then I am setting the customer password to the same object again, which is encoded. So earlier in the customer object, we have original password. Okay. Now I am setting the encoded password to the same customer object. After setting the encoded password, then I am going to save the customer record. Customer repository.save. Now check in the database, select a star from customer. Okay, still it is waiting. Yes, now the record is inserted in the table. Customer record is inserted. Now you see original password is inserted in the database or encoded password inserted in the database. Guys,
Encoded, sir, encoded.
original password is inserted or encoded password is inserted.
Encoded password.
Encoded password is inserted in the database F8. Now you go to the postman and you see what is the response we are getting. 201 created. We got that status code we are getting as a 201. That means it is a post request. So I got the response, customer registered 201, record is created. So earlier in the security configuration, the request is not processed because of the CSRF token enabled by default in the security. So I'm disabling that CSRF by using http.csrf.disable.build. So this is our security configuration. By default, CSRF is enabled, but the token is missing here. So that is the reason we are disabling that CSRF and we are building our HTTP object.
Sir, CSRF function, can you call inside that authentication, sir? After authentication, can't you call like a...
We can call anywhere, sir.
Okay, sir.
It is basically available in the HTTP.
Yes, sir.
You can do like this also. Instead of calling like this, you can do like this also. http.csrf.disable.authorize requests. Like this also you can call.
Okay, sir.
Okay, but what I have done, I'm calling this CSRF at the end.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, you are writing lambda expression, sir. What is the parameter type, sir? Data type of the request.
Type of the request parameter. Authorize requests. The data type is authorize requests. Authorize manager request here. That is the data type. So whatever the security is there, for this security I'm telling any request coming with these URL patterns, you allow them. Any other request comes, that should be authenticated. Then, so by default CSRF is enabled in the Spring Security. So with this enabled, we are not able to send the request. That's why I'm disabling the CSRF and I'm building the security filter chain. With this, I'm able to register the customer. Now, let me go for another user record. Raju@gmail.com and password Raju@123, phone number, some different number I am giving. Click on send. Now I sent a post request again. So the request is processed because we are permitting the request which is coming with the URL/register. It is taking original password and it is going to encode that password. Raju123 is the original password I have given. Now it is going to encode that password and this is the encoded password we see. That encoded password we are setting to the customer object and we are inserting the record into table. So another customer record inserted into the table. So that means our registration functionality is working as expected. Select star from customer. Ashok is registered, Raju is registered. Password is not storing original value. Encoded password is storing into database table. Now the main thing is authentication. That means login functionality we need to implement. In order to implement a login functionality only, we added authentication provider, we added authentication manager. These two things will play the important role for the login. For the registration, these two things are not required. Authentication manager, authentication provider are required for the login only. You got my point? Perfect. Now let me create one method which is for login check. So public response entity, let me stop the server. Public response entity of string, response entity of string. I'm checking login check here. Right. So this is also a post request method. I'm taking a post mapping and the URL pattern / login. Anybody can try login. Security is not required for the login method. Anyone can access. Okay. Post mapping / login. For the login also, I'm going to take the customer email ID password in the form of a binding object only. As a request body, I'm going to take this login. Okay. So by default, I'm going to say return new response entity. I'm saying that as invalid credentials. I'm giving a message invalid credentials, HTTP status dot bad request. HTTP status dot bad request 400. That means the data is coming invalid. So whenever you send a login request with the customer data, then I'm returning bad request with a message invalid credential. But sometimes credentials can be valid, sometimes credentials can be invalid. Now how to verify the credentials are valid or not? So whenever you are trying to log in, so you will send a post request like this /login. You will send only your email ID and password. You will send only your email ID and password. Are you going to send the password which is available in the database, or you will send the password which is original password? Come on,
Sir,
guys.
original password.
At the time of trying to log in the application, you will give the password which is available in the database, or you will give the original password.
Original password.
You will give the original password or the password which is there in the database. We are going to give the original password. But in the database, original password is available. In the database, encrypted password is available.
Encrypted.
Now, how to perform the authentication? Okay, so for this one, we have already configured authentication provider and we configured authentication manager. Authentication manager is responsible to perform authentication of the users. So that's why I'm going to inject authentication manager bean here. I will not verify the credentials are valid or not. I will tell to authentication manager to verify my credentials. Authentication manager already we configured as a Spring Bean. That authentication manager we are injecting into our REST controller. Auth manager we are injecting. What is the role of the auth manager in our system? What is the role of auth manager in our system, guys? What is the role of auth manager in our system? Come on, guys. What is the role of auth manager in our system?
उसमें आप कैसे कह रहे हो मैसेज क्यों गई कि
Sorry? What is the role of auth manager in our system? I'm not getting the response.
So the
Authentication manager will form the authentication
User
provider to
authentication.
validate the backend.
Auth manager is responsible to perform the authentication of users, basically login. Earlier, how we will implement login? Whatever the email ID and password we are getting, email ID and password we are getting, okay, that email ID and password we are going to verify with the database table, is that valid or not. If it is valid, we will say login is valid. If it is not valid, then we will say invalid credential. That manually we will do. But now we no need to do that work manually. We need to tell to authentication manager to perform that process. We should not do that process manually. We need to tell to authentication manager to validate the credentials now. Okay, guys.
Yes, sir. Right.
Good. So authentication manager object I have injected. So whenever you are going to perform the authentication, here auth manager dot authenticate method is available, guys. In order to verify the credentials are valid or not, we are going to use authentication manager dot authenticate method. For the authenticate method, we need to pass the authentication object. Now you see auth manager dot authenticate method is available. What is the purpose of that authenticate method? Which is used to verify user credentials are valid or not. So the authenticate method is expecting authentication object. So what authentication object? Email ID and password we will give. Username and password authentication token we need to create. Username, password authentication token we need to create. Token is equal to new username password authentication token. For this token we are going to pass customer dot get email comma password. Which one you want to use to authenticate the user? How you want to authenticate the user? Based on the customer given email ID and password in the login request. Customer dot get email ID, customer dot get password. Whatever the email ID and password you give in the request, with that I am creating the authentication token object. That authentication token object I will pass to authenticate method. I am passing to authenticate method. So authentication may be successful or authentication may be failure. So now whenever you call this authenticate method with the token, it will return authentication object. Now what I will do, if authenticate dot is authenticated, if authenticated dot is authenticated, that means credentials are valid. Then I am going to return new response entity of welcome login success. Welcome to Ashok IT HTTP status dot OK. That means it is a valid login. So this is how you need to implement a login functionality in the real-time project by using Spring Security. So user registration will be available and user login will be available. When we go for the registration, straightforward. We are getting the customer data in the request body. Original password will come in the request body. We are encoding that password by using password encoder. Which password encoder? We already configured bcrypt password encoder. By using that bcrypt password encoder, we are encoding the user customer password. We are resetting the password to the customer object which is encoded. Then we are going to save the customer. Customer record will be inserted into database table and you can see password is not original password. It is encoded password by using bcrypt encoder. Now I want to check the login functionality of the user. So user will give the original password, but in the database encoded password is available. So how to perform the authentication of the users now? To perform the authentication of the users in the Spring Security, we have authentication manager. We are configuring the authentication manager. So what this authentication manager will do? Authentication manager will talk to authentication provider. So in the REST controller, I have injected my authentication manager. Authentication manager dot authenticate method I am calling. This method, if the authentication is valid, then no problem. If the authentication is failed, it will throw the exception, guys. So that's why I'm going to keep this logic in the try catch block. I will keep this logic in the try catch block. Now e dot print stack trace. So in the try block, I'm going to keep this logic. If authentication is successful, then I will return the response, welcome to Ashok IT. If any exception occurred, that means our authentication is failed, then I will return invalid credentials message back. So here, how we are doing this authentication, guys? We are not retrieving the record from the database for authentication. Am I writing any logic to generally how the login functionality will verify? Customer will give the email ID and password.
Yes, sir. Checking
That
with the
email
data.
ID and password, we will execute a query with the table and we will see with the given email ID and password, record is available in the table or not. If the record is available in the table, then we will say the record is valid. If with the given credentials, if the record is not available, then we will say invalid credential. That programmer will do. But in the Spring Security, you no need to do that logic. Whatever the email ID and password you are getting from the login page, that email ID and password you pass to authentication object. You create one authentication object. That authentication object you pass to authenticate method which is available in the authentication manager. Authentication manager will take care of authentication. You no need to do that. It is not your responsibility to perform authentication. Spring Security will take care of that. So whichever the email ID password you are coming from the login page or you are coming from the postman. So that details you pass to username password authentication token object. That authentication token object you pass to authenticate method. Where is this authenticate method? Authenticate method is available in the authentication manager. Where is this authentication manager? We already customized in our security configuration. I configured authentication manager bean. Then authentication manager is going to call this authenticate method with the given email ID and password. Then what will happen in the background? In the background, this authenticate method will internally talk to authentication provider. That means, hey boss, I got a request for authentication where the user details available for the authentication. I got the email ID and password. Now I want to verify they are valid or not. So here authentication manager authenticate method internally will communicate with the authentication provider. Who is our authentication provider? DAO authentication provider. What is the meaning of DAO authentication provider? Data access object. So our data is available in the database. Who is responsible to load the data from the database? To load the data from the database, we configured user details service, which is our customer service. So authentication manager will talk to authentication provider. Authentication provider will talk to user details service. In that user details service, we are overriding the method. So in that method, what is there? Load user by username method is available, which will retrieve the record only based on the email ID without considering the password. So once it retrieves the record without considering the password, then it will use password encoder. In the background, that authentication manager will retrieve the customer record based on the email ID. Customer record contains email ID with encrypted password, but the user has given the original password. Then it is the responsibility of the authentication manager to verify the customer given password is matching with the password available in the database. So whatever the password you are giving, this password also will be encrypted or encoded and it will compare with the customer record password. If both are matching, then it will say authentication is successful. Is authenticated nothing but to true. So whatever the password you are giving, which will be encrypted and it will compare the database password, the record password in the database, your password matching. If it is matching, then is authenticated is true. If it is not matching, is authenticated false. If the authentication is true, no problem. If authentication is failed, then it will throw the exception. I am eating that exception by using catch block now. If the exception occurred, then this logic will not execute. Then I will return invalid credentials. If authentication is successful, then exception will not occur. Then this logic will be executed. Authentication I am taking care of, or authentication taken care by Spring Security now?
Spring Security, sir. Please.
Authentication is our responsibility, or authentication is Spring Security responsibility?
Spring Security.
Akhil, you understand what is the difference with your code and my code? Akhil, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Akhil. So you observe what is the difference here?
Yes, right.
So you have implemented login on your own. You are retrieving the email ID based on the email ID and password you are comparing. That's
Yes,
not required. In the
Right.
Spring, when I say login registration with the Spring Security, you need to use authentication manager to perform the authentication. Email ID and password valid or not, you no need to validate. Spring Security will validate when you use authenticate method. For authenticate method, what is the parameter? Authentication object, username and password. In our scenario, email ID and password. What authentication manager will do? Authentication manager will talk to authentication provider. Authentication provider will talk to user detail service. What is the role of user detail service in our scenario? What is the role of this class, guys? What is the role of this class in our scenario?
Loading
Get the
user
role,
details, sir.
Database.
It is used to load the user record with the email ID and password, or only with email ID?
Username and password, sir. Both.
Check it properly. Is it retrieving the record based on email ID and password, or only based on
No.
email ID?
No, sir. Email ID, only email
Email.
ID, sir.
Find by email. Then how it
Yes,
will
sir,
verify password is correct or not? How it will verify the password is correct or not?
Authentication provider will verify.
Authentication manager internally will verify.
Verify.
It is retrieving the record only based on the email ID. Password is valid or not? Why it is not retrieving along with the password? Why it is not retrieving the record with email ID and password? Why it is retrieving only with email ID?
Because
Why it
password
is
is
retrieving the record with
encrypted in
only email ID?
database.
Because
Common
password
sense.
is encrypted in the database. You cannot.
Correct answer. It is what is the name of the method, guys? When I implement this interface, what is the name of the method? Load user by username.
Username.
That is not load user by username and password. Only by username we are loading. Because if you want to retrieve the record in the database is having encrypted password, but the user is giving original password. Both are not same. So that's why it is retrieving the record only with the username. So what I have done, I'm retrieving the record with only mail ID, not with the password. Then comparison. So customer record will come. The customer record will contain the encrypted password, but the user is giving the original password. So in the Spring Security authentication logic, the authentication manager will take care of that. It will retrieve the customer record only based on the email ID. Password comparison will happen in the code. That will happen in the background. Spring Security will take care of that. Are you clear?
Sir, can you draw a flow diagram explaining the flow, sir, on this?
Yes, sir. First, let me see, is it working or not?
Okay.
Guys, are you able to understand the logic of the login method? Let me write the login logic once again for you. Yeah. So I am taking one login check method. In this method I am mapped to post request. I'm expecting customer record in the request body. All right. Customer record I'm expecting in the request body. Now I want to validate the user credentials are valid or not. Validating the credentials is not my responsibility. That is responsibility of the authentication manager. So I have taken authentication manager object, authentication manager dot authenticate method I am calling. For authenticate method I need to pass token, username and password token I need to pass, which is username, password, authentication token. Token is equal to new username and password authentication token, customer dot get email ID and customer dot get password. Customer dot get email ID and customer dot get password. I got the token. Now that token I will pass as a parameter to authenticate method to validate the credentials. I'm passing that token, right? It is going to return authentication object. So authenticate method, if authentication is valid, no problem. If authentication is not valid, it will throw the exception. Okay. So let me refactor surround with the try catch block, guys. I'm writing try catch block because if authentication is failed, exception will come. E.print stack trace. Now authenticate method I'm keeping in the try block because there is a chance of getting the exception with that method. Now, how I will verify authentication is successful or not? If
Is authenticated.
authenticate dot is authenticated. What is the meaning of is authenticated? What is the meaning of is authenticated?
Either true or false.
It's a success, sir. It's successor.
Valid
He's checking that he has
credentials. Is authenticated means valid credentials. If authentication is failed, exception will come. It will go to catch block. I'm eating the exception in the catch block. You can write a logger. Then I'm returning invalid credentials message. Okay, let's verify. Is it working or not? Let's run the system. Already my records are inserted. There are two customer records I inserted. One is Ashok, another one is Raju. Ashok password Ashok @123. Raju password Raju @123. Yes, I think application is started now. Application is started. Clear the console. Postman, send the login request with valid details. Okay. When I send the request with valid details, what is happening now?
Success response. Welcome to.
Can we say authentication is success?
Yes, sir. Sir, yes, right.
We are getting the message, welcome to Ashok IT. Now let me give wrong password 456789. Original password up to 123 only. The request is authenticated. So see here, in the background, a query is executing to retrieve the record based on the given email ID. So authentication is successful. Now if I give invalid data, I'm giving the wrong password, send the request. What it is saying now? What it is saying, guys?
Invalid.
Invalid credential. Mail ID is valid only. Only password is wrong. It is saying bad request. You see in the backend, exception occurred because authentication is failed, bad credential. So it is retrieving the customer record based on the email ID and it is comparing the password is matching or not. In the database, encrypted password is available and here I am giving the original password. If I give the original password, then again it will say welcome to Ashok IT. Authentication is successful. If you give original password, then only it is authenticating. If you give the wrong details, then it is giving invalid credentials. So user registration and user login is working as expected. By using Spring Security, we implemented this. So this is our registration method and this is our login method. But at the time of registration, we are encoding the password and we are saving the record. At the time of login, we are using authentication manager. Okay, so what is happening in our application now? User is registration is simple and straightforward. There is no complexity there. So whenever you are going for login functionality, okay. So in the login functionality, what we are doing, login method internally calling authentication manager, guys. Login method internally calling authentication manager. So what this authentication manager, in this authentication manager, we have a method called authenticate method. For this authenticate method, we are passing one token. So what is this token? This token is username and password token we are passing. Okay, username and password we are giving as a token for this authenticate method. and we are calling this authenticate method with the help of username and password. We are giving that token as the input for the authenticate method. What this authenticate method will do internally? Authentication method internally will talk to authentication provider. Authentication method will internally talk to authentication provider. What this authentication provider is doing in the background? Authentication provider is talking to user details service. User details service is available, and in the background it is talking to one more component which is called password encoder. These two details we are configuring to authentication provider. User details service is available, password encoder is available. Auth provider is talking to user details service and it is talking to password encoder. Authenticate method internally will talk to auth provider. What this user details service is doing? That user details service is talking to our customer service. User details service is nothing but our customer service that we have created. So what this customer service is doing now? This customer service is talking to our customer repository. Customer service is talking to customer repository. Customer repository is loading the customer record based on the email ID from the database. Here our database is available. DB table is available. Customer repository talking to database table. What is this password encoder? Password encoder is talking to bcrypt password encoder. We are using bcrypt password encoder, which is used to encode the password in our system. So here our REST controller is available. Our REST controller. Our REST controller is internally talking to auth manager. This is our REST controller. Our REST controller is internally talking to auth manager for the login functionality. And auth manager is internally talking to authenticate method. Authenticate method is expecting a token. Username and password we are passing as a token. Username and password we are passing as a token. Then that authenticate method will internally talk to auth provider. Auth provider talking to user detail service, password encoder. Password encoder is bcrypt password encoder. What this user detail service will do? It will talk to customer service. Customer service is internally talking to customer repository. Customer repository is internally talking to database to load the customer record. This is the execution flow for the login, only for login. For registration, it is straightforward.
So doesn't he show any form login page, sir, in this case? Form
No, sir,
login
it is
page.
no, not required. No, it is directly post request method from Postman we are sending. Generally, this request will come from the UI application.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So we can configure the role-based authorization.
Sorry, sir.
We can also configure a role-based authorization in the security filter set, right?
Yeah, authorization also you can configure. That means which user can access which method we can configure. And one more class is available here, which is this one more bean security filter chain we have customized. What is the purpose of security filter chain, guys? What is the security filter chain here? What is the role of security filter chain?
To like validate the like provide the permissions to request incoming request.
Yes. So user detail service means customer service is getting the data from load user by username. This is the method that we are getting from the repository. That method is calling. Security filter chain we customize. That security filter chain we used to customize this authentication manager we customized by using filter chain. Okay, in the security config we customized filter chain, we customized auth provider, we customized auth manager also. All these, this is one bean, this is one bean, this is one bean. 3 beans we customized by using security configuration.
So can you debug, sir? More time.
So what I have done here? Hello? /register and /login. Anybody can send the request for the register and login. No security. Directly we can access them.
Sir,
Directly we can access them.
previously for in-memory authentication and all, we sent username and password in headers, right, sir?
Correct.
Here we
That
are
is basic
directly
authentication. That is basic authentication.
here we are directly passing in the request body.
Correct. We are having a separate login method. So for this login method, we are sending that customer email ID and password in the request body.
Sir, can you debug, sir?
Sorry?
Can you debug, sir, one more time? Login.
Your voice is not clear, sir. Can you come
You want to
again?
give the roles, where to give, sir, in that user details only, sir? If you want to
Yeah,
give
in
the
the
roles.
user details only we can give the roles. Here, you can retrieve the roles from the database also. You can maintain a separate table for the roles for the user. And whatever the roles we are having, whenever we are returning the customer object, here you can set the roles of the user. I'm passing empty list because there is no role available for the customer as of now. I'm giving the empty list. If you want to give the role, you can supply the role name.
Okay, sir. That role only can access particular method, sir. In that case.
Yeah. Guys, look at this diagram. Lot of things are happening in the background when you use Spring Security for login. So your REST controller is taking a login request. Then it is going to call the authentication manager authenticate method with the username password in the token. Authentication manager internally talk to authentication provider. Provider will talk to service and encoder. This user detail service we are using, customer service is implementing this user detail service, overriding this method. That customer service is going to talk to customer repository, will load the record based on the email ID. After getting the record based on the email ID, it will compare the password. If the password is matching, then the authentication will be successful. Otherwise, the authentication will be failed. So if the given email ID password success, then only this logic will be executed. If you given email ID password, anything is wrong, then it will fail, then immediately exception will occur. Look at login method logic. This is the login method logic, and this is execution flow of the login method. Security, Spring Security, one of the most powerful framework here.
Sir, can you debug the login method, sir?
Can we?
Debug the login method, sir.
Yeah, we can. I'm running in the debug mode, and we can debug that login method.
So generally, like, what will be the best approach to debug? Like, sometime when we put the breakpoint also, but it goes to internal methods.
You need to
And
come out from the internal methods, sir. By using F7, you can come out from the internal methods.
okay, and if we are using the ID like this Spring Suite tool, then can we do it on Spring Suite tool?
Yes, sir. You can do in the Eclipse, Spring Toolsuit, IntelliJ, in all the IDEs, you can perform the debugging.
Like which steps we need to follow, sir, basically?
I will share one debugging video for you, sir. In our YouTube channel, I have already uploaded debugging video. I will share that.
Sure, sir.
Sir, in IntelliJ, this keys will work F6, F5.
Those are key, the shortcuts
Those
are
are
different.
separate.
In the IntelliJ and STS, the shortcuts are different. Okay, I kept a breakpoint for my login method, guys. Click on send request. Breakpoint is enabled. Now you can see I got the request to the login method and customer object. What data is coming in the customer object? Only email ID and password is coming. Email is raju@gmail.com. Password is raju@1234. Okay. Now with this, I'm creating a token. Username, password, token object is created. That token I am passing to auth manager authenticate. Authenticate is our method or it is a predefined method?
Predefined method.
Authenticate is our method or it is a predefined method?
It is predefined method, sir.
It is a predefined method. Okay. Now go here. F6. If authentication is successful, then no exception. If authentication is failure, then exception will occur. I'm checking. Now see here, internally, this method is called or not. Am I calling this method or my authenticate method is calling this method? Load user by username. Who is calling this method? Am I calling this method or my authenticate method is calling this?
Authenticate method. Authenticate method, sir. Authenticate method.
Authenticate method is calling, which is used to load the record based on the email ID. Customer repository find by email. It is loading the record based on the email ID. Yes, it retrieved the record. After getting this record, then again it is going back to predefined code. DAO authentication provider predefined code, load user details by username. So whatever the method we are writing, that method is called internally by which class, guys? Which class is calling that? In which class that method is available? Who is this? Can you read the class name? Authentication provider. As we discussed, auth manager authenticate method we are calling. Internally it is calling auth provider. Who is our auth provider? DAO auth provider. So we are using DAO auth provider. The DAO auth provider internally calling user details, load user by username. Load user by username. So this method we have overriding in the customer service. Okay. So that customer service method will be called. This is predefined code, guys. You want to come out from the predefined code, F7. So go to F7. You need to come back to your previous logic where we have our REST controller. Still internal code is executing. Okay. Internal logics are executing. It is giving an exception. What is that? Bad credentials. So authentication is failed. We are getting bad credentials. Why we are getting bad credentials? What is the password I have given? 1234. What is the original password? Which is 123 only. Then click on send again. Again the post request came and F6. Authenticate method it is calling. Authenticate method internally calling our load user by username. Then we will come back to the DAO provider predefined method. Come out from the predefined logic. We should come to our REST controller. Here breakpoint. Authenticate method provider manager authenticate method is available. Now we came back to our method. Authenticate is successful. If authenticate dot is authenticated, authentication is successful. We are able to send this message. Welcome to Ashok IT. Authentication is successful. If I give invalid password, then my authentication will be failed. When the authentication is failed, it will go to the catch block. Now you see, when the authenticate is retrieving the user record based on the email ID, then it will go to catch block. Why it is going to catch block? Authentication is failed. We are getting exception, bad credentials. So whatever the method we are calling, if the authentication is valid, then okay. If authentication is invalid, it will throw the exception. If the exception occurs, that means credentials are invalid. So internally, how the code is executing. This is the flow. Can someone explain this flow? Guys, can someone explain the flow? How the login is working? Can somebody explain the flow, how the login is working?
Sir, via code or only for with the diagram?
With diagram.
Sorry, sir.
With diagram.
With diagram. Okay. So whenever we send a request via Postman, it comes to the REST controller. REST controller where we map our endpoint. like a post request, then it will take the credential, go take to the authentication manager. Authentication manager will internally create a user and password object, which is passed as a token to the authenticate method, which internally calls to the DAO authenticate provider, which basically maintain our user detail and password encoder. And password encoder, basically it will encode our password, and which is basically used to encode our password, and user detail is basically used to load our user data using email ID, which is done in a customer service, and customer service communicate with the customer repository, which retrieves the email, customer data via email, and then the call is get back to the again to the authentication manager, which checks whether the password is equal or not, and then if the password is equal, like if the password is success, then it will send a response back to the controller to display the success message, or if the password is different, then it will make a bad request call to the uh, request controller.
Good. Fine, guys. So whatever the assignment I have given yesterday, this is the solution for that. Okay. So this is how we have implemented. Create entity class and repository interface for that. Then create one user details service class. Create customer service by implementing. User detail service class. Then create security configure class, which is used to customize the security configuration. Create REST controller with required methods, then run the application and test it. These are the 6 steps that we have done. Development process. First step is creating the application. Second step, configuring data source. Third step, entity class and repository. Fourth step, service class we created. Fifth step, security configuration. Sorry, this is a third. This is 4. This is 5, 6, 7. Right? Run the application and test the application. So for this, you need code also, guys. Do you need code also?
Yes, sir.
I think, yeah. Spring Secure registration login. It is there in my Git repository. Okay. Yes. Spring Boot security register login. I think this is different. This login registration. Authentication manager filter chain. Oh, this is basically with the JWT token available. This is not that. Let me create a Git repository. I'm creating a Git repository. I will push my code into Git repository, whatever I have done today.
Sir, can this repository, Git repository, be accessed anyway?
Yes, sir.
Even at office also, sir?
Sorry?
From office login also? User.
You can access. It is a public repository.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah. So whatever the application we developed today, you can access Spring Boot register login, security based application we developed. Copy this Git repository I am giving in the notes. So these are the steps you need to follow, guys. The code login and registration using Spring Security. So this is the requirement. For this requirement, the source code Git repository is available here. Whatever the coding I have done today, I already uploaded to Git repository. This is the process. You create the project, configure data source properties, create entity class and repository, customer service available, security config, REST controller, and run the application and test the application. I'm going to upload this class notes in the website, and the source code is already there in the Git repo. You can do the practice. Any questions, anybody? I have updated the class notes, guys. Code is already pushed to Git repository. Yes, fine. It is done.
Sir, JW token addition that will cover tomorrow or next?
Tomorrow we'll talk about OAuth. After OAuth,
Okay.
then we will talk about JWT.
Sure.
Those two topics are pending. OAuth and JWT is pending.
Yeah.
Fine, guys. Thank you. I'm stopping now. We'll meet in the tomorrow session.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you, man.